Hey everyone, today we're going to go through the entire process of unwrapping a character in Maya. Once you get through this tutorial, you'll be able to unwrap any type of model or character going forward. I will also have a table of contents down below and timestamps to allow you to jump to any part of the tutorial where you may want to focus on a specific part of the character. From my previous video on unwrapping UVs in 5 minutes, creating UVs is just taking a surface of a 3D object and converting that surface to a 2D coordinate system, so going from XYZ to UVs. I will break down unwrapping UVs in 5 key steps so you'll be able to take a model like our hammer boy here and create UVs like this. As always, if this content helped out, a like is always appreciated, and let me know down below if I missed anything. With that, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so here we are. We're going to go ahead and start the unwrapping process. Now, typically the first thing that I do is go ahead and give our character here a clean slate. Now, what I am going to do is just go ahead and hide my hammer here, which I unwrapped in my previous video on unwrapping UVs in 5 minutes, which was just a quick kickstart high-level video on unwrapping UVs. Now, here's our character, and if we take a look and we select the mesh, I can go ahead and open up my UV editor from UVs and set editor. Now, as you can see, there are UVs. This is just a very quick auto unwrap. You may have something that looks like this, or it might look like a jumbled mess. Really, the key thing that we want to do here is completely remove any previous UVs. All right, this just gives us a clean slate and allows us to move forward. So what I'm going to do is select the entire character mesh like this and go to UV, delete UVs. Okay, and so what that does now, as you can see, there are no UVs whatsoever here within the UV coordinate system. Okay, and what I'm also going to do is just go ahead and kind of move my UV editor here to the left, and I'm going to dock my UV toolkit, which has all of our tools here, to the left of that, or excuse me, to the right. Then I'm going to take the entire UV editor and dock that next to my viewport here, and give myself a little bit more room here, and I'll be able to kind of work with this here. Okay. So the first thing that we're going to want to start with is the character's body and head. I think this will be a really good breakdown on approaching the rest of the character. Okay. So the first thing that we need to do is where we want to split the edges or split the seams. Okay, so the way that you want to think about UVs is think about kind of a dice or a pop can or kind of like an earth globe, where you're taking 2D planes, 2D objects, and conforming it to a 3D form. Okay, so in this case, we're taking a 3D form and converting it here to a 2D space. Okay, so the first thing that we need now to do is give it a clean set of UVs. So we can just simply go to create and we can do kind of like a planar, okay? A planar or even camera based. Either one is going to give you a clean set of UVs. So we can see what camera based does, and it goes ahead and kind of creates UVs, and it creates the UVs kind of from this camera based projection, okay? Then what we want to do now is start essentially chopping up this character. Okay, so think about skinning and pelting, right? Basically, I mean, it's kind of a gruesome thought, but to take a pelt from an animal, and if you were to kind of cut it and remove it from that animal, you're going to get those seams. So that's what we want to do here. So the first thing I want to do is go ahead and select the arm. Now, what's really useful is I would go ahead and go to your modeling toolkit and enable symmetry. And if you have a symmetrical character, just set it to whatever axis that you're working with. In this case, I'm using World X. So now when I select my edges, I don't have to go back to the other side, and having symmetry just speeds up the workflow immensely. Okay. Then what I want to do is go ahead now and take these arms, and we're going to cut this, and this is what's going to give us a seam. And by cutting this here, by simply going to cut and sew and using cut, so now you can see it starts to correspond with our mesh. You can see that now we have white edges here, and that has now become a seam. So what that means is if we go back to our UV editor, we can actually select the UVs. So if I hold right click and go to the UV subobject mode, then double click on our character, you can see now the body is separate from the arms. So I've created what's called a new UV shell. And with this new UV shell, I can split and add another seam so it unfolds and pelts properly. Okay, so what am I going to do with, how am I going to do that? I will go ahead now and kind of just use this edge here along the arm and double click that. And that's going to give us a nice seam right underneath the arms. Okay, and when it comes to seams, you know, one thing to keep in mind is that it doesn't matter so much anymore where the seams are. With texture painting softwares like Substance Painter, ZBrush, you know, Marmoset, all these tools, right? You can paint it in 3D. So seams aren't as a big deal anymore. It used to be a huge deal back when all we had was Photoshop or other older painter softwares. Okay, so with that, go ahead and select this edge now underneath the arm, and now you can go to cut or hold shift and right click and go to cut. Now we've added another seam right along the underside of the arm. Great. Then what we want to do now is unfold. Okay, so we can select these arms and scroll down here, and you can see that we have unfold right here. If it's not docked, undock it, and then simply hit unfold, and there you go. Okay, so now you can see that the arms have unfolded properly. Now, what I do want to do is disable symmetry real quick and then unfold it, and that'll allow us to make sure that, you know, things are looking and behaving properly. Okay, so now that I have that, you know, we can make sure to go ahead and put back our symmetry. We want to make sure that it looks good by double checking our checkerboard. There's a nice checker map right here where you can click this checkerboard and you can see the checkerboard. And since we use camera base, you can see that it looks good from basically the angle that we're looking at it from. But if you look around the character, you can see that it's skewed and looks very bad. And the reason, what we're trying to aim for here is nice even squares all around the mesh. And we're going to use seams to help minimize distortion. Okay, so the next thing I want to do now is go ahead and disable checkerboard, and we're going to apply this to the body. All right, so I will go ahead and select maybe right below the base of the neck. So we're going to basically chop his head off. And then what I'm going to do is kind of continue this seam that we have here for the arm all the way down the length of the body. Okay, so there's really no, you know, clean way for the human body to have no noticeable seams. But again, with texture painting, that can be completely minimized. All right, what I am going to do is separate the front from the back of the body. So that means I can go in here and select kind of these edge loops that run inside on the underside of the body and on the outside. Now, keep in mind, I do need to select the shoulder. But what I'm going to show you is basically what happens if you don't add proper seams. So I will go ahead now, shift right click, cut. So now you can see we can move our rest of the body away from the character. Then I can actually do shift right click, unfold, then unfold again. Okay, and so there you go. Now this isn't terrible, but what we want to do is, this is taking up a lot of UV space, and I want to cut it right here, right kind of where that shoulder line is. All right, so we can do that by kind of just selecting this front shoulder edge here, and then going down here and doing a cut. All right, so we can cut that. And then now, if we double click, we can unfold that, shift right click, unfold, unfold, and you can see that we get a nicer unfold there. Now, let's say, you know what, you're going through and you're like, I don't like having the arms separate. What I want to do is reattach it. Well, I can show you how to do that real quick. What you can do is select the arm, and you want to select the shared edge. In this case, it's going to be this part of the arm right here. Now you can see that we're missing a split here, so I can go ahead, just quickly show you, cut that, and then we can have these two as separate objects. Now I can go back to the shared edge on this character shoulder here and do what's called a sew. Now there's a couple different ways to do this. So if you do a sew, it'll basically just kind of merge the edges in the middle, so you can undo that. You can do a stitch together, which will just completely move the mesh and do its best to position it where the original part of the body is. Or you can use a sew tool, which will kind of just do like a target weld. Okay, so if you wanted to approach it a little bit differently and just kind of have the front separated from the back with the arms attached, you certainly can. All right, so I will go ahead and keep it like this. So I'm going to undo this and kind of move forward. Keep in mind, you know, there are so many different ways, you know, to unwrap a character, and it really kind of just depends on what you're trying to do and how you're trying to texture it. So if you need to combine different parts of the body, then go for it. All right, I'm going to go ahead and just rotate these in position. And a good rule of thumb, especially since we will be in Substance Painter, is keep these guys in the one-to-one UV coordinate system. Okay, now that we have that, let's go ahead and move on to the head. Okay, the face. So here we are with the face, and you can see it's a uniform, concave, one solid object, okay, and very spherical. Now, you may have eyelids or an inside of the mouth. As you can see, I just have the lips. You're going to want to separate those. So just make sure to do that, is to kind of cut seams and separate them. And I'm going to do that with the ears here. All right. So what I want to do now is essentially kind of cut from the back of the head, kind of like you would do with a Halloween mask, right? As if you'd have a Halloween mask, you're essentially going to cut it all the way from the back, leave that opening, and then bring it maybe right about where the hairline would be here. And then what I'm going to do is kind of, you know, of course, turning symmetry on, and split this kind of horizontally on the forehead here. All right, so we have that. Then I'm going to shift right click in my UV editor and cut. There. So now we can see that we have this nice UV here, or the seam here. And I want to do the same thing, kind of running from the underside and kind of up to right about the chin. And this is just going to help minimize distortion. Okay, so we have those seams. And then what I know I'm going to do is do the same thing for the ear. I'm just going to select this edge loop that goes all the way around the ear and then split that. And thankfully, because we have symmetry, we only have to do that once. So now what I can do is select the entire head, or, you know, double click it. But we'll go ahead and marquee select and do an unfold. And there you go. Okay, so you can see that it unfolds pretty nicely here. And we have the ears set up, and you can see that the scales are a little bit off because of the way the camera base did it. Don't worry about that. All you simply need to do is select the mesh and run a layout, arrange and layout. Okay, so if I go down to arrange and layout, at the bottom there's a layout, and what that's going to do is set the scale. So let me undo that and just kind of show you again. So if we go here, need a little bit of room here for my UV editor. Yep, there's our checkerboard. You can see that the squares are bigger on one side than they are the other, and you can see that clearly in the UVs. So a simple layout will rescale and reposition everything. And sometimes layout does a really good job. Sometimes it's just looking at this objectively and trying to shove as much UV space in here by keeping things uniformly scaled. But I typically still kind of go through and make sure to have, to kind of organize these in a way that makes sense for me to texture. Okay, so you can see here we have the top of the ears right underneath, and you know what, I may want to take the ears and actually put them up here with the head. Okay, and then we have the front, or I should say the back of the body here, and we have the front of the body here. If I wanted to switch those around, For whatever reason, I certainly can. And you can see kind of how this is rearranging. I can move this up a little bit more to give myself more space. So definitely want to spend a little bit of time organizing your layout. So just keep that in mind as you move along. But for right now, I'll just simply go ahead and repack it, and it keeps it into the one-to-one UV space. Okay. So hopefully, right, to kind of summarize quickly on the head, the 5 key steps are creating a blank slate, selecting seams, cutting seams, unfolding, and then laying out UVs. And if you do that, you'll pretty much be completely set on unwrapping anything else. So let's go ahead. Let's prove that theory. I'm going to hide the character, and let's move on to probably the next most complicated thing, which is the gloves or the hands. Okay. So I'm going to select the hands and gloves, hit Control 1. By the way, I'm using Control 1 just to toggle isolate mode. Select our gloves here. And what I'm going to do is just kind of select this, and this time I will go ahead and use a create planar. And for this planar, you can see that just kind of gives me this plane here. And what you can do is hit this little T for transform at the bottom, because right now this is a scale. Okay, we don't really care about that much. We hit T for transform and we get our typical Maya gizmo. And I'm going to hit the circle here, and that gives us our rotate tool. Then now what I can do is just rotate this 90 degrees, jump to our channel box editor, and just rotate it in the X 90. All right. Now what that does is just kind of essentially just gives us this nice top-down view, which is perfect. Okay. So we can just kind of bring these back and put these in the middle here. Now, actually, these gloves are symmetrical, so I'm going to just go ahead and focus on one glove here. All right. So I have this glove here now. And what I want to do, again, is the hand is a very organic object. And we're going to approach it the same whether this was the hand or the glove. Okay. Now, what I want to do is essentially just kind of split the hand in 2 pieces, front and back. So you can see that I have this nice edge here running all the way around, essentially the tips of the fingers, and all the way around to the back of the glove, which is great. And I can, even split that. Basically, this is how it would be, fabricated, stitched, and sewn together in real life. If you ever take a look at gloves, there's going to be a seam, essentially a natural seam anyways, that runs all the way around. If you look at your hand right now, you'll see that there's actually surface differences and skin differences between the top of the hand and the bottom of the hand, okay, and your palm and all of that. So this makes the most sense. All right. So what I can do is now make sure to kind of deselect those edges here, and I'm going to select this interior loop there. So I want this piece separated. Otherwise, that would cause a lot of issues. So here's kind of what I have selected. Then I'm going to select the inside of this hand here. All right. I'm actually going to go ahead and deselect this entirely, that horizontal edge running. So here's what I have. I have this edge running all the way around the hand here. And I have this cap being separated and this interior cap as well. So I can now, we select our seams. Let's cut our seams. Then we can go ahead and select these, unfold our UVs, and there you go. Now it looks a little bit wonky, but let's go ahead and actually take a look at the UVs. Look at that. There is minimal amount of distortion here. Okay, and we have nice even squares. We can, of course, make sure to rotate this where it's kind of nice and straight and not just kind of at a random angle. So it looks pretty good. Now, if for whatever reason you're like, well, I want to minimize seams, you certainly can try to go ahead and maybe grab this edge here so you can see this shared edge. And I can go ahead now and do that move and sew, or that stitch together, I should say. So boom, so stitch together does a pretty good job. Then I can unfold again and boom, look at that. That's actually not too bad, right? So that seam works out pretty well. We're looking around and overall it's pretty solid. And so we'll be able to kind of texture paint a natural seam there and kind of keeps things more uniform, all right? So just a couple different ways to approach that. and we can, again, scale that up if you want, just to make sure to avoid any distortion. And you can see right about here, this is the inside of that glove. So you can unfold that like so. Now, if you want, you can definitely split this down the middle here. We can do a cut, and then you can do another unfold, and then it's there. And you can see we can just make sure that cap is good. Now, let's say maybe you wanted a different material or a metal to kind of run around this piece of the glove. Okay, so let's say you wanted to take this here. Okay, now what you can do is cut this, and I can grab this here. And if you wanted to kind of just straighten that a little bit, you can do what's called unfold along. So you can see if I unfold along it'll make sure that it kind of better spaces it out, and we get a nice, again, better distribution. Now, there's a little bit of distortion happening, but it's not all that big of a deal. Actually, if you go to view here and go to UV Distortion, you can see that this gives us kind of this colored map. And a good rule of thumb is white is obviously the most ideal, light blue is okay, and light red is okay. All right. So if you wanted to kind of address some areas or minimize some distortion, you certainly can. All right. So I believe, if I remember correctly, like maybe if I go in here and kind of like stretch these out. Yeah. So blue means it's stretching too much, and then red means it's kind of pinching too much. All right. So again, you can see like really when it starts to be a problem, right? When it gets really red, or if it's starting to scale out too much, it gets really blue. But light blue, light red are completely fine. Don't kill yourself trying to get to, perfect white here. Okay. So I can go to view, and you can of course hit that with 7 on the keyboard. So I can hit 7 and turn that off. And all I did was turn on B for soft select as well. B as in Bravo. All right. So we have that. And then what I want to do is grab this little leather strap here. All right. And we can select these little straps. And all I want to do is we can just kind of split these. Now I can, again, excuse me. Whoops. All right. We can go ahead and just select this edge here. And I will go ahead and turn off the checkerboard so it's a little easier to see. And you can see how I'm going around and selecting that. All right. And it's all the way hiding up here. And we can just do a cut. We can do a cut and then kind of move, and then move those and do an unfold. Same thing. We can go ahead and grab kind of that underside, select that edge loop running all the way around, and cut, unfold, and we can just select these and unfold. Meant to select them in that mode. All right. So now what you can do is select both of these, okay, and then all of these meshes and do another layout, okay. And keep in mind, you definitely have the under modify layout. You have settings here. These are the settings that I use. Okay, I do not do shell pre-rotate. I do not want it to rotate. I want it to preserve the 3D ratios. Translates fine, do not rotate. And keep this packing resolutions at 256. If you increase that quite a bit, that's just basically the computer, iteratively trying to find the best use case for space. So the more complex your mesh, the more complex your UVs, the longer that will take. You can see it goes really fast just with 256 and yields really good results. So I also do texture map size 2048 with 2 pixels here of padding. So that means that when I go in, there is 2 pixels in a 2K resolution worth of space. Okay, if this was set to 0, I believe by default, look at that. Like that's butting up right next to it. So I always give myself a little bit of room, and feel free to kind of bump that up if you don't like them so close. All right. So you go ahead and just kind of save those settings, hit close, and then anytime you relay those out, it will use those settings. All right. So then what I want to do now is actually, let's go ahead and do the gloves here. And we can actually bring our character back because he looks a little weird floating there with his eyes. Let's go ahead and do our boot. Okay, we're going to do the kind of the same quick process here. All right, we're going to go ahead and do a, in this case, I think it's fine to just do a straight camera base from the top-ish. And let's go ahead and split it. We know that the bottom is going to have a nice simple UV seam here running around the bottom. All right, we're going to have that running all the way around. Cool. Then we're going to, again, kind of how we will approach the glove, split this running from the back. All right, so I'm going to split this up here. Actually, I'm going to go maybe all the way up here and then cut this cap. Whenever you have these very organic shapes, always cut the cap. So basically, if you have like a Pepsi can or a cylinder, cut the caps top and bottom and you'll be good to go. Okay, and then I will actually continue this down like so. All right, so we're going to split this across here, and we may need to split it again, but let's just see what happens. So I shift, hold, right click, cut after selecting seams, go to UV, shift, right click, unfold, or find your unfold right here, and look at that. It does a really, really good job unfolding those UVs. All right. Okay, now again, if you wanted this piece to be straight, you can use that planar projection and then use unfold UV along UV, but I'm fine with how it is right now. So then I can select everything and lay it out and pack it, and boom. Okay, so let's see what the UVs look like. We can hit this checkerboard here, and it looks pretty good. Now, if you want to quickly take a look and scale that up, you can see it actually does a fantastic job. I mean, I think having this seam here along the back just allows it to unfold as perfectly as we need it. And just to double check, we can check our UV distortion here, a little bit of light red, a little bit of squashing and stretching here. Again, if we wanted to, we can go ahead and separate this seam right about on the underside of this, cut that, and that should help minimize that red and blue. And there you go. A lot less blue, a lot less red. And I think that's good for now. Okay. And again, there will be natural seams here when you're combining this shoe. So this works completely fine. Okay. So I will go ahead and hit 7 on my keyboard to get out of distortion view. I will select all my UVs and lay this out. And the other thing, just in case you want some control over what you see here, you can go ahead and assign, I can maybe turn off this grid here, and I can grab this material, and let's go to this Fong, and we can go to our color, and let's just plug in this file. Okay, you can go to File, and we can have our UV checkerboard, and I just found this one online. It's like your typical colored UV checkerboard. And then you can see, boom, there it is. So it applies, and all I did was just plug that in right to the diffuse slot. And then we can go to place 2D texture and maybe give it a repeat here about 8 and 8. Okay, and so this will again allow us to make sure just to view this, make sure that there's no distortion happening, the numbers look uniform, and everything looks just correct. All right. Okay, so I'll undo that, and I'll probably do that, apply one at the very end. Okay, so I will go ahead now, select these guys, these little laces here, and what I want to do is just select these edges. You can certainly kind of go in if you wanted to, of course. Just want to get in here and Control-1 isolate these. And let's go ahead and continue that edge selection. Select our seams, cut our seams. Oops. Probably do that again. Okay, we're cutting our seam. I will do the same thing here on the other lace. Okay, and cut. Select these guys and unfold them both. Boom. And we can go ahead now and select the entire shoe and lay those out. Now, keep in mind, here's the thing. I was like, oh boy, we just did that on the left side, the character's left side, and you don't want to do that again. Well, no worries. We can just select these on the other side, and all I'm going to do is just outright delete them. Grab the boots and the gloves here. Do a Control D, okay, as in dog. Control G for group. All right. Then I'm going to go to channel box, and we'll scale in the negative axes, -1. And here's the most important thing. Don't just walk away and move on to the next thing. You have to freeze your transformations. And then I'm going to just ungroup here. So now I have everything inside of this group here. Actually, I'm going to just select the boots and gloves. Then you have to make sure that you fix your UVs and relay these out, okay? By relaying these out, it makes sure that you don't have backwards faces or flipped UVs, because that will cause a lot of issues in Substance Painter. All right, and look at that. On layout, did a really good job of just packing this all together. There's some cleanup I can do, but I think I'm good. All right. All right, so we're making pretty good time here. I'm going to go ahead now and do the clothing. Okay, and I'm going to Control 1 to isolate. And as you can imagine, it's pretty straightforward. I will go ahead and just kind of angle it to the front and do a create and just camera based. Okay, a little bit quicker than messing with the planer. So I have my shirt selected. As you can imagine, clothing has natural seams. So the natural seam is typically right on the underside of the shirt and right on your shoulder. I mean, you can look at your own t-shirt or whatever you're wearing right now and probably see those natural seams. All right. Now, of course, let's not forget to turn on our symmetry now that we're working with one symmetrical object. All right. So here we are. And shift right click, cut. Boom. Okay. So we're going to grab the collar, and instead I'm just going to simply, this is probably a good one where I actually want to do this from the top. So I'm going to create the camera based UV. And what I want to do from the top is split this on the back, because there's going to have to be a seam here somewhere. Then I want to unwrap along along V. Okay, and if I do an unfold, actually, we'll probably unfold it first. Okay, and then let's see. I mean, we're probably not getting as good results right now, so I'm just going to go ahead and just stick with the regular unfold. And again, if we take a look at this, you can see that the checkerboard looks really fine. Okay, so it's basically like if we took a square pattern and cut it out of that square pattern. So keep in mind, if you scale UVs, you do have to just turn off symmetry. All right, so we have that, and let's grab our shorts. Going to select our shorts and turn off texture view, and it's going to be the same thing. We're going to just kind of create that edge that runs across there and right along the underside as well. So everything's looking good, and I want to go ahead and actually cut it right across there. And I do need to make sure I have symmetry on, and boom. All right, so you can see how that splits it there. And I will shift right click cut, and I think I forgot to do the inside of the shirt as well. So no big deal, just go back there, cut. So that's why it's good to just kind of select everything, double check your seams. Okay, you can see here, yep, everything's looking good there on the shirt. Everything's looking good on the collar, and then the pants look fine. I would probably say, actually, I'm gonna select this and shift right click so, because I actually want it to be more in the center here. Then shift right click cut. So again, you can modify your seams. We haven't committed to unfolding yet, so everything's fine. So then we can select everything, unfold, boom, look at that. Layout, Look at that. All right, great. So then just now we'll start to straighten our UVs out, right? Because we'll most likely be using fabric textures. And just quickly just like rotate these. And I don't want to spend a lot of time in this tutorial doing that, but I'll just do that real quick, rotate it and move on. So you can see now you have nice clean UVs, okay? And of course, if you want to see just kind of how it looks, scale them up, verify that it all looks good. And once you're done, just relay those out. Okay, so looks like we're doing really good. The last thing is the hair. Now in my case, you know, I was trying to experimenting with different hair pieces. What you can do, I'm going to probably just take maybe 3 of these pieces here. And as you can imagine, they're pretty much all the same, you guys. I'm not going to sit here and unwrap. I don't know how many pieces do I got. 25, almost 25 pieces of hair. But what I am going to do is just select the hair and do a create and do a camera based again. And we'll go ahead now and select our edge. Now in this case, I want to keep the front in one solid texture, and I want to split the back side. Okay. Now by doing that, if I shift right click cut and then select these 2 and unfold, boom. All right. So the key thing as I go, just make sure to straighten these and rotate these. You might have sometimes some UVs that are just kind of like rotated, blah, blah, blah. As you go, rotate them so they're straight, because this is going to make our texturing life a lot easier, because we're going to take this guy, our little hammer boy, and we're going to put him right into Substance and do a lot of cool texturing there. Okay, so unfold, and there you can kind of see these at an odd angle. So I just want to make these nice and straight. That's going to help us later. And same thing here. Oops, make sure not to transform anything. And you can see, guys, I planned my topology at the beginning. I planned my UVs. I have good topology for UVs, okay? So if you are having a hard time with this, what that typically means is your topology needs to be addressed. Because you can see, I basically just select one loop and then cut, right? So I select one loop and then cut, and then I have my seam. I have everything ready to go. If you had bad topology, if you have issues where you have triangles where you don't need them, it's just going to slow down the process, okay? So just keep that in mind. Topology is incredibly important as you're going through and doing this. I'm going to kind of take this hair cap here. Again, I had this nice edge loop that's running all the way around. And I'm going to separate that here. Perfect. And we have our World X there. And I can do a cut and do a unfold here. So look how simple that was for this hair cap. Okay. All right. Okay. So here we are. And if I go back now and just kind of select those main 3 pieces, I believe it was these 3, you can see I can just do another layout and I can start to lay all of that out together. Okay. So last thing, yeah, I mean, we have the eyes and the eyebrows, which again are really simple, I guess, relative to everything else, but we'll make sure to finish this off. So we can do a camera based here from the front, and I believe this is one combined object with symmetry. You can see I have the backsides deleted, which is going to make unwrapping easy. I already did that beforehand, so I can simply go ahead. I don't need to do anything aside from unfold. And look at that. You can double check, make sure there's no skewing, things looking good. And then for our eyes, okay, what you want to do, I mean, I can maybe do these together since they're so simple, is I'll turn off this, is select essentially where the pupil and the iris is. And that's where, you know I'm gonna do some texturing for some colors, and we're gonna cut those UVs, and look at that. I can start moving some things around. Things are looking good. And I need to make sure to split the sphere, just like a cylinder, as it's making its way around, and cut off the caps. That's really just the best way to approach it. Okay. If you also find yourself, you know, unable to get rid of distortion and whatnot, add more seams. Really, that's what it comes down to, is just adding more seams. You know, not going crazy, not doing like an auto unwrap equivalent, but the more complex the object, the more seams you're just naturally going to have. So don't feel like you have to avoid it at all costs. Okay. All right. There's our eyeballs. So I'm going to kind of put those together. All right. And we'll select those, lay those out. Great. Okay. Now, if you were so inclined to, what you can do, like if this is a game character, and you're like, you know, you have your notes to combine everything on one 2K map, well, simply select the entire character. Look at our big old eyebrows here, right? And do a layout. Now, keep in mind, I don't have the hair fully unwrapped, but here we are. And you can see now, okay, that things are looking really good. So, you know, we can do our final pass where we can go ahead, maybe if we wanted to, just quickly do a Fong material and grab our color file, and let's plug in that checker map that we have, which is just going to be our UV checkerboard, and we can place 2D texture, and there we go. And you can maybe do 8x8, whatever. Okay, and you can see now there's some things that we have to make sure to scale and make sure to fix. It's not a big deal. What you can do is select something like the shirt, okay, and go to transform, and you can do a get texel density on maybe a 2K map size, and then on everything else set that texel density. And look at that. It went ahead and set the texel density on everything. Okay, so we have our shirt here. Then you can go down to relay out everything, and then we're back. Or it looks like it's still shrinking the body. Yeah. Okay, so real quick, the reason why we were having some scaling issues and texel density issues was because this parent group here with the character group has some scales on it. So in order to fix that, just select the character group, freeze transformation here, without center pivot, freeze transformation. And once you do that, okay, then you'll have no issues going in. Now I can select these objects. Really, I can select everything, right? Because let's say maybe the shirt is what I want to use as the target texel density. So I can use that as a get here. So get that as a texel density and scale. Select everything, set that. There we go. So I can click off of that, and you can see everything is the proper scale now, or texel density. So I can go ahead, maybe for the character, do that layout that I was talking about, and everything will scale properly. Glad we caught that little issue, but yeah, let's move on. So, and here's the accessories, the hammer, and well, I'll be creating this character with about 2 to 3 UV texture maps all told. So that'll be kind of a fun process. So again, went through, and we're sitting at about, you know, somewhere around 40 minutes here, which isn't all that bad to take an entire character from beginning to end. So again, if this was helpful, a simple like would be very helpful. Throw down a comment if you have any tips that could help, you know, even myself or anyone else kind of going through this. Subscribe is always nice as well. So I will see you guys later. Thanks. Bye.